What if magic isn't about secret rituals, wands, and mystical powers, but something far more surprising?
Something different, yeah.
Like a pragmatic, incredibly adaptable approach to fundamentally changing your reality and even yourself.
Exactly.
That's the mind-bending question we're diving into today as we unpack the fascinating world of chaos magic, guided by Phil Hine's seminal work, Condensed Chaos, an introduction to chaos magic.
It's a truly revolutionary perspective. William S. Burroughs, the author of Naked Lunch,
Yeah?
he captured this perfectly in a compelling quote featured right in the book's front matter. He said, "Magic, in the light of modern physics, quantum theory and probability theory is now approaching science.
Wow.
We hope that a result of this will be a synthesis so that science will become more magical and magic more scientific."
That's a powerful statement right out of the gate. It immediately
Yes.
flips the script on what most of us, think magic is.
It really does.
Our mission in this deep dive is to extract the most important nuggets of knowledge from Hine's work, offer you some truly surprising facts, and we'll give you a shortcut to understanding this often misunderstood yet utterly practical and fascinating subject.
Let's get into it.
So let's start by shaking up our traditional notions. How does Phil Hine redefine magic itself? Because it's clearly not about waving a sparkly wand or chanting ancient spells.
You're right. It's far more grounded. Hine argues that magic is fundamentally about change.
Change, okay.
It's presented as a doorway into mystery, wildness, and a state he calls immanence, and here's the key insight. It's the radical understanding that the divine or magical isn't some distant, abstract realm, but is intensely present within your immediate experience, right here and now.
So not out there, but in here.
Exactly. This perspective directly counters the pervasive, often unconscious belief that we are helpless or subject to external forces. It puts personal responsibility and our inherent ability to affect change right at the forefront. In fact, Hine suggests that all acts of personal or collective liberation are, in this view, inherently magical acts.
Ah, interesting.
Leading to exhilaration, ecstasy, insight, and profound self and world transformation.
That's a truly powerful reframing. It sounds less like fantasy and more like a tool for real-world empowerment.
It really is.
So beyond the gobbledygook that magic often gets associated with, what tangible benefits does this approach offer you, the listener?
Well, Hine is very clear on the practical benefits. It offers a means to disentangle yourself from the restrictions and limiting attitudes you were brought up with,
Okay.
helping you modify hindering patterns. It can significantly increase your confidence and charisma, widen your perception of what's truly possible for you, and actively develop new skills and perceptions.
Sounds useful.
And crucially, the book emphasizes that engaging with magic should be fun.
Fun, really.
Yeah, it's ultimately about bringing about change in accordance with your will and enjoying the process.
So if this is a practical system for change, what are its core principles? The fundamental building blocks, if you will, of chaos magic.
Well, the first and perhaps most revolutionary is the avoidance of dogmatism.
Avoidance of dogma.
Okay. Chaos magicians actively strive to avoid fixed beliefs. They're actually encouraged to change their minds, contradict themselves, and even be wrong occasionally.
Seriously?
That's wild. Yeah. The Discordians, a group Hine often references, have a great saying about this. Us Discordians must stick apart.
I like that.
It's a radical departure from systems that demand rigid adherence to a single dogma.
That's a truly refreshing counterpoint to how many people perceive magic. It instantly cuts through all the usual rigid structures.
Naturally.
So once you start shedding those fixed beliefs, what's the next fundamental principle Hine introduces?
That would be technical excellence.
Okay, excellent.
This is where the book flips a common misconception on its head. Chaos magic isn't about sloppiness or just making it up as you go.
Right, not just random chaos.
Not at all. It demands rigorous self-assessment, analysis, and consistent practice to achieve desired results. The key insight here is that true magical power comes not from innate talent or secret rituals, but from diligent, almost scientific-like discipline in your own inner work.
So it's disciplined experimentation, not just throwing spaghetti at the wall.
Exactly.
And that intense self-scrutiny leads directly into the concept of deconditioning, doesn't it?
Exactly. Deconditioning is a primary task for the aspiring magician. It's about thoroughly shedding the mesh of societal and personal beliefs, attitudes, and what Hine calls ego fictions.
Ego fictions.
Whoa.
Like our stories about ourselves.
Pretty much. He argues that our ego is essentially a fictional, stable selfhood maintained by perpetuating distinctions like what I am versus what I am not. This process of deconditioning is about widening what he calls cracks in consensual reality, making you less attached to these fictions.
Okay.
And more able to discard or modify them when they no longer serve you. It's like clearing out old, unhelpful programming from your mind to make space for new possibilities.
That makes so much sense. And what's the engine that drives magical ability once you've done all that shedding and deconditioning?
That's gnosis.
Gnosis.
Right. This is considered the key to magical ability, the willed entry into altered states of consciousness. Hine distinguishes between two poles of what he calls physiological gnosis.
Two poles.
Yeah. Inhibitory states, which are physically passive techniques like meditation, yoga, or sensory deprivation.
Okay, calm states.
And excitatory states, which involve intense activity like chanting, drumming, dance, or even sexual arousal.
Wow, quite the range.
The idea is to bypass the conscious mind and access deeper levels of awareness.
The name chaos magic itself can sound a bit, well, anarchic or random.
You can, yeah.
But the book connects it to something else entirely, something surprisingly scientific.
It does, and this is where it gets really interesting. Chaos magic was very much perceived as experimental magic, constantly questioning implicit truths. What's truly fascinating is the synchronicity with the simultaneous development of chaos science, focusing on nonlinear dynamics and fractals.
Chaos science, like actual science.
Yes. Hine notes that in 1987, there was an exhibition of chaos science at the University of Leeds, and later that same year, Leeds hosted the first symposium of chaos magic.
No way. The same year.
It's almost like two parallel lines of inquiry converging.
It's a perfect example of synergy. And chaos really became quite the buzzword in the late 80s and 90s, especially with fractals showing up everywhere from T-shirts to popular culture.
Oh, yeah.
Remember the mathematician Ian Malcolm in Spielberg's Jurassic Park, popularizing nonlinear dynamics?
Absolutely. And within chaos magic, fractal logic became a core motif. The deep insight here is how incredibly complex beauty can arise from incredibly simple rules.
Right, like the Mandelbrot set.
Exactly. Think of the Mandelbrot set, defined by the equation z = z² + c. It generates an infinite, intricate pattern.
Amazing pattern.
Fractals are self-similar at any scale, meaning no matter how much you zoom in, you see variations of the overall shape. This pattern is seen everywhere in nature. Mountains, clouds, coastlines, even the branching of trees are circulatory systems, and how galaxies form.
Wow.
It profoundly challenges our habitual linear experience of the world, showing hidden complexity and simplicity.
So if the world is fundamentally fractal, what does this mean for magic in the material world? How does chaos magic bridge the gap between the mystical and the mundane?
Well, Hine deconstructs what he calls the 19th century false dichotomy of high magic, spiritual, versus low magic, mundane.
High versus low.
Okay. This separation, he argues, had philosophical roots in post-Enlightenment Christianity, which drove a wedge between the spiritual realm of the church and the temporal playground of emerging scientists.
Right, the split.
The shocking part. Modern science itself, through quantum physics and nonlinear dynamics, paradoxically offers reconciliation.
How so?
Bringing us back to the awareness that the world is magical.
That's a powerful point. Science, which was once seen as the adversary of the spiritual, now helps us see the magic inherent in reality.
Kind of ironic, isn't it?
But this kind of magic sounds like it's not to be trifled with.
You've hit on a critical point. Magic, as defined by Hine, is powerful and potentially dangerous precisely because it provokes change.
Right. Change isn't always easy.
It's not for everyone, nor is it an instant enlightenment process. The ability to perform advanced acts of magic requires years of dedicated effort. Study, training, consistent practice, self-analysis, and growing self-awareness.
It's a real commitment then.
Absolutely. The core message here is that you cannot shape the world without being reshaped in the process. Each gain of power requires its own sacrifice.
A sacrifice.
And the game of magical consequences never ends.
That's a strong warning. So how do you even begin to approach this kind of practical change? What's the fundamental tool for focusing your intent?
The core importance for effective sorcery, for practical magic in the material world, is the statement of intent.
Statement of intent. Got it.
All formalized acts of magic require one, structured along the lines of It is my will to do something for a designated result.
Very specific.
It's about being incredibly clear and precise about what you want to achieve, so you can then assess your performance and link specific magical techniques to observable outcomes. It's a pragmatic, results-oriented approach.
So it's clear becoming a magician isn't about instant gratification. It sounds like a lifelong practice of cultivating inner qualities.
It absolutely is. Becoming a magician takes time, practice, and lived experience, not just reading books.
Right.
While Aleister Crowley famously declared magic is for all, Hine points out that many of Crowley's associates who tried to be magicians failed, often ending in madness or misery.
Oh, wow.
Which really suggests it's not for everyone.
A sobering thought.
A significant quality a magician develops through this journey is poise. A profound, self-assured assurance of manner, maintained everywhere, recognized and respected by other magicians.
Poise, like inner balance.
Yeah, an inner calm that radiates outward.
Poise is such an interesting concept for a magician.
Yeah.
How do you cultivate that or even begin to prepare for this kind of rigorous magical practice?
Well, one of the biggest adversaries you'll face is inertia.
Inertia, yeah, I know that one.
Hine calls it your most deadly magical adversary. We often tell ourselves excuses like, I'm lazy or I can't concentrate.
Mm-hmm.
The surprising insight here is that the very fact you come up with attractive excuses to avoid practice can actually be taken as a good sign.
A good sign. How?
Because it shows you're challenging established, comfortable patterns within yourself.
So resistance can actually mean you're on the right track.
Potentially, yes.
What about managing your time for this kind of consistent practice? We're all so busy.
The advice is short time frequently over long period infrequently.
Short and frequent.
5 minutes of daily meditation, for example, is considered far more beneficial than half an hour every 3 minutes. This consistent, short engagement builds momentum and confidence in your ability to follow through.
And what if you get overwhelmed, like with too many books or rituals? It sounds like you need a break sometimes.
Absolutely. The book suggests taking a holiday from active magical work.
A magic holiday.
Yeah. This is particularly useful if you're overloading yourself or just reading without truly assimilating the information.
Right.
Paradoxically, taking a break can be a magical act in itself, allowing your subconscious to integrate what you've learned and letting you approach practice with renewed freshness and enthusiasm.
So there are distinct stages of learning. Much like any skill, it's not always going to feel exciting.
That's right. There's the initial enthusiasm, which is wonderful, but then comes the often dreaded dry or boring phase where most people quit.
The slump.
Exactly. The key insight here is that gritting your teeth and pushing past this dry phase is crucial for reaching the final stage. Effortless proficiency.
And how do you track your progress, or even figure out what's truly working over time?
This is where the magical diary becomes critically important.
The diary.
It's described as both a work record and confessor. You should include what was done, its duration, location, weather, your feelings, ideas, and general comments.
Details.
It's invaluable for gaining long-term insight into your patterns and for honest self-assessment. The key rule, as in all self-work, is honesty. You must be prepared to acknowledge your weak areas.
Know thyself.
Know thyself remains a core axiom here.
Beyond discipline, practice, and honest self-assessment, what are the essential qualities of an effective magician that Hine describes?
One vital quality is relaxation in the immediate present.
Relaxation.
This means being fully attentive to what's happening around you right now without projecting future scenarios or being limited by past conditioning.
Being present.
If you're truly relaxed, you can perceive the present as it unfolds without rigidly passing it with expectations.
And confidence seems absolutely vital for anything you're trying to manifest.
It is. Confidence, while situation-dependent, is a transferable skill. It helps short-circuit what Hine calls lust of result.
Lust of result.
That anxious, desperate clinging to a specific outcome. The idea is that if you desire something too intensely or worry too much about it, you actually prevent it from manifesting.
Because you're blocking it.
Because your energy is tied up in anxiety rather than released towards creation. Preparation, including mentally rehearsing scenarios, is key here, similar to research done by, say, the American Department of Defense.
Mental rehearsal, right.
Confidence is also linked to neophilia, the tendency to be open to new ideas. Confident people don't feel the need to rigidly defend their current beliefs.
Neophilia. Love of the new. Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
What about ethics or personal code of conduct? Is there one in chaos magic?
There's the quality of honor. Instead of external holy books or dogmas, Chaos magic advocates developing a deeply personal ethical code. Hine states that your words have power, and if you believe they can bind entities, they can also bind you.
Your words bind you. Okay.
Promptly dealing with problems and admitting errors are also part of this honor. It's about deep integrity, not just power.
And what about awareness itself? How do you sharpen your perception?
Through attention and intuition.
Attention and intuition.
This involves training yourself to be highly aware of your environment while remaining detached. Intuition is seen as a refined form of attentiveness, allowing decisions without conscious logical deduction.
Gut feelings.
Recognizing very small sensory cues and often appearing when you are relaxed. Hine gives an example of a therapist making snap diagnoses based on these subtle, intuitive cues.
So practical skills like organization are important too. It's not just about abstract thought.
Not at all. Organization and striving for excellence are crucial.
Organization.
Right. Organization improves with practice and significantly increases effectiveness. Being a magician, as Hine puts it, is not a state of being, but a dynamic engagement.
A dynamic engagement.
There's no zero state of having made it. There's always more to learn and integrate, and you should strive for the best in everything you do.
And finally, what about breadth of knowledge?
That's erudition. Robert Anton Wilson is famously quoted as saying, "Specialization is for insects."
Love that.
Powerful magicians, according to Hine, have wide-ranging interests but are bound by none. It's not enough to have specialized knowledge. Great care must be taken in how that knowledge is expressed and integrated.
This all sounds like a path of intense self-improvement and transformation. But are there dangers along this path? What should a practitioner be aware of?
Absolutely. Hine highlights 3 common pitfalls. First, cosmic tragedy.
Cosmic tragedy. Sounds dramatic.
It is. It's the risk of over-dramatizing personal problems, turning everyday issues into cosmic initiations.
Making mountains out of molehills, magically speaking.
Pretty much. Second, paranoia. The tendency to generate an atmosphere of magical paranoia and look for external enemies.
The blame game.
Hine notes that 99% of what feels like magical attack is actually self-inflicted, covering up personal insecurities.
Ouch. Self-inflicted.
And third, Gnostic burnout, which is simply overdoing magical work, leading to exhaustion.
Burnout, yeah.
The important insight here is that if you're a good magician pushing your limits, you should expect to go into these weird states of consciousness and experience burnout. It's not a sign of failure, but often a sign of progress.
We've explored the foundations and the inner toolkit of a magician. But how does this translate into practical sorcery, into actively changing things in your everyday life? The book introduces a really powerful, simple framework for that called DR8.
Yes, the DR formula: discipline, relaxation, attention, transformation.
DRAT.
It's presented not just for rituals, but as a set of principles for dealing with the world at large. Discipline helps you conquer inertia, but too much can lead to rigidity.
Right, balance.
Relaxation ensures that discipline is used well, preventing tension. Attention is a skill that requires both discipline and relaxation. And transformation is the synthesis and outcome of the other 3. This isn't just theory, it's a way of approaching and engaging with life itself.
And a big part of that is body-mind training for change, connecting your thoughts and physical states in a very direct way.
That's right. Relaxation itself is identified as the very beginning of sorcery, the act of willing a change in reality by uniting thought, breath, and action. It involves consciously breaking what Hine calls the anxiety loop. Through physical components like controlled breathing and muscle relaxation, cognitive components like self-affirming thoughts and visualizing realistic outcomes, and behavioral components like eliminating unnecessary physical tensions.
Physical, cognitive, behavioral.
Got it. He also addresses performance dissonance, the gap between what we think we can do and what we actually can, by emphasizing realistic self-assessment.
So it's about being profoundly present and aware of your own physical state, connecting mind and body for magical effect.
Precisely. This leads directly into exercises for body awareness and postural shifts.
Okay, body awareness.
For example, focusing awareness on distinct body areas or experimenting with how simply changing your posture affects your feelings and how others respond to you.
Posture affects feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense.
You can even consciously adopt postures appropriate to desired qualities, influencing your inner state.
Power posing almost.
Sort of. Another fascinating exercise is do easy, finding the easiest, most relaxed way to do any action, even routine tasks like opening a door.
Do easy. I like that.
This enhances your overall awareness and reduces wasted energy, bringing a magical quality to the mundane.
This sounds like a deep form of embodied mindfulness with a magical purpose.
Oh.
What about how we perceive time itself?
Hine discusses moving in time, explaining time as a byproduct of consciousness.
Time is a byproduct.
Yeah.
Interesting.
We are constantly moving between the experienced past, memory, and anticipated futures, fantasy. The great work of magic, he suggests, is the collapsing of the future into the immediate present.
Relaxing the future.
This means seizing reality and living now, free from the bonds of the past, and understanding that the future is simply the manifestation of your will in the present moment.
Living now.
He also introduces lateral diaries with 4 columns: physical observations, memories, reading fragments, and overheard conversations,
4 columns.
as a powerful tool to reveal nonlinear connections and patterns you might otherwise miss.
That sounds like a way to see the hidden patterns of reality and how things are truly interconnected.
It can be, yeah.
And what about enhancing our basic sensory perceptions?
Shades of perception and sensory enhancement involves techniques for narrowing and widening your perception by focusing on each sensory modality.
Sharpening the senses.
This includes intense object concentration, detailed visualization, exploring colors deeply, using smell as a direct hotline to memory,
Smell and memory, yes.
training your ear to listen to subtle pitches, and paying close attention to touch and taste. The aim is to sharpen your conscious awareness of the richness of reality.
And then there's the powerful technique of pathworking, which sounds almost like entering a vivid dream world.
Pathworking is exactly that. Constructing and entering narrative scenes, either mythic or instructive, to evoke specific emotional and cognitive reactions.
Like guided journeys.
It can be structured, semi-structured, or unstructured, for example, using a tarot card as a doorway into a symbolic landscape.
A tarot doorway.
Cool.
It's used for training, for belief system familiarization, and particularly for confronting fears. Hine describes even a dying pathworking to address the fear of death.
Wow.
By faithfully experiencing the process in an altered state.
So it's like a guided visualization, but with a much deeper transformative purpose. How does the body play into this more abstract work?
Through kinesthetic memory.
Aesthetic body memory. This involves developing a vivid awareness of the body of light, often called the astral body or double, by intensely evoking muscle sensations and movements even without physical motion.
Feeling movement without moving.
It can be used for rehearsing situations and exploring dream states. This leads into the concept of the astral temple,
Astral
of
temple.
your personalized inner sanctuary, an imagined space for magical action, and the star chamber, which is visualized as a transparent crystal sphere for multiverse travel. This star chamber is depicted as capable of extruding devices for scrying, generating servitors, or projecting desires into other realities.
Wow, so you can literally build your own psychic command center.
In a sense, yes.
And then there's trance and perception, which sounds like a core element.
It absolutely is. This is about the willed alteration of perception. Hine contrasts modern Western ideas of passive trance with varied active states.
Active trance states.
Detailing both excitatory, like hyperventilation or intense dance, and inhibitory, like deep meditation or sensory deprivation techniques. These states are used for enhancing abilities, fostering communal ecstasy, improving connectivity like overcoming writer's block, and even for public demonstration.
Right.
He references Lucian's description of a Delphic priestess to highlight the intensity of these experiences.
And what about something we all do every night, dreams? Can they be harnessed magically?
Dreams are considered a useful starting point for entering inner worlds and exploring consciousness. You can work to induce prophetic dreams, shared dreams, or most powerfully, lucid dreams,
Lucid dreaming, yeah.
where you realize you're dreaming and can consciously direct the dream's content. Hine suggests programming specific triggers like seeing a particular image to cue lucidity within a dream.
So after all this intense inner work and exploration, grounding yourself is important, right?
Crucially important. That's centering.
Centering.
Practices like the banishing ritual, often involving the visualization of a cross of light and tracing pentagrams, are used to establish a strong physical presence and prepare for action, leading to a feeling of deep relaxation and being perfectly poised.
Getting centered, poised.
And underlying all of this is the concept of the magical will.
Ah, the will. Most people think of it as willpower, brute force concentration.
Right, clenching your teeth.
But that's not what it is here, is it?
Not at all. The magical will is not willpower or concentration, but a relaxed single-mindedness, a profound unity of desire and purpose, and crucially, a detachment from results.
Detachment again.
Think of it like a perfectly aimed arrow. You pull the string back with focus, release it smoothly, and then immediately let go, trusting it to hit the target without obsessing over its flight path.
Letting go.
That trust, that letting go, is the essence of the magical will. Desires manifest, Hine says, when they have been isolated, exteriorized, and then completely forgotten.
That brings us to one of the most famous and practical chaos magic techniques, sigil magic. It's known for its simplicity and surprising effectiveness.
Indeed. Sigil magic, largely derived from the work of artist and occultist Austin Osman Spare, is presented as exceptionally results-oriented and effective regardless of your personal belief system.
Doesn't matter what you believe.
Spare famously demonstrated that effective magic can be done at a moment's notice virtually anywhere without elaborate props. Hine outlines the SPLIFF process for this.
Let's break it down. So the S is for statement of intent.
Yes, the absolute need for clarity and precision in what you want. Hine shares a classic anecdote of an acquaintance who sigilized for a specific lover with precise details about their appearance and car, but completely forgot to include intelligence.
Oh, no.
The lover manifested exactly as described, but, as Hine dryly notes, was completely boring.
Huh. Be careful what you wish for.
This story perfectly illustrates the critical importance of careful wording and thoughtful intent.
That's a brutal but hilarious lesson in specificity. So the takeaway here really is, be painfully clear about your intentions, or you might just get exactly what you asked for, but not what you truly wanted.
Exactly right.
What about the P for pathways available?
This step emphasizes actively opening a path for your intent to manifest. The Frater Bader anecdote from the book illustrates this vividly. He did a spell for money and gained it, but it came through sudden deaths of relatives or a combined harvester accident.
Yikes.
Had he opened a clear path, like writing a book or applying for a new job, the results might have been less dramatically inconvenient. You're creating the conditions for the magic to work through natural means.
Okay, so you have your clear intent and you've considered the pathways. Now, how do you turn that intent into something you can work with? L for link intent to symbolic carrier.
You convert the intent into a symbolic code. Two common ways are a monogram, a unique glyph created from the letters of your statement.
A symbol, right?
Or a mantra, a scrambled phrase or word from your intent like, I desire assistance in house hunting, becoming the delightfully nonsensical, the sun can sing.
The sun can sing, okay.
Yeah, it needs to be meaningless to the conscious mind.
And then you project it. I for intense gnosis or indifferent vacuity.
This is about using altered states of consciousness to project the sigil. It can be intense, like vigorous spinning, chanting, or sexual arousal to reach a peak of gnosis.
A high-energy way.
Or, surprisingly, it can be achieved through a state of not particularly bothered indifferent vacuity, like doodling your sigil during a boring talk where your conscious attention is completely elsewhere.
The low-energy way.
The key is that your conscious mind isn't actively thinking about the intent.
And then the literal release. F for fire.
This is the projection of the sigil at the peak of the chosen altered state. Examples include the moment of orgasm, a powerful sneeze, reaching the point of blackout from hyperventilation.
Intense moments.
Or that sudden jolt of being asked a question about the boring talk you were supposedly listening to. The moment of peak release, when the conscious mind is overloaded or distracted, is when the sigil is fired into the subconscious.
And finally, the hardest but most crucial step. F, forget.
This is absolutely critical, letting the butterfly effect take its course. Hine uses the analogy of tending a garden plant meticulously and then purposefully forgetting about it.
Just let it go.
Results often come when the original intent has become latent, completely forgotten by our conscious mind. If the intent gets tangled with other thoughts or anxieties, it significantly decreases the probability of manifestation.
Right.
The underlying confidence that it will work, so you don't need to dwell on it, is the real magic here.
Are there any advanced sigil techniques mentioned in the book?
Oh, yes. For recording results, Hine suggests taping a scrap of paper with the sigil drawn on one side and the original intent on the other, so you don't immediately recall the original desire when reviewing your magical diary. You can experiment with approaches like preparing multiple sigils, purposefully losing them, and then randomly empowering one later. Doodling them onto everyday objects, incorporating them into photos, tattoos, or clothing are also mentioned.
Okay.
There's also linked sigils, where a trigger sigil you might encounter in reality, like Woman with long red hair carrying a small dog.
The Pacific trigger.
Causes a microburst of gnosis to automatically fire a different main sigil.
Wow, like a chain reaction.
And finally, swapping sigils with another practitioner can aid forgetfulness, as the sigil you receive is meaningless to you.
So it's almost like a rigorous, iterative process, like a scientific experiment or a business project. The PIE process for sorcery.
That's it. Plan, implement, evaluate.
PIE.
Plan your resources, magical, material, financial, and even assistance from others. Implement means doing the actual work, actively overcoming laziness and fear. Each step forward builds momentum. And evaluate means honestly assessing your results. The book gives a humorous example of sigilizing for new sources of pleasure and getting computer games instead of new sexual entanglements.
Not quite the same thing.
It emphasizes that you must be scrupulously honest about whether the actual result matches your specific intent. It forces you to refine your approach.
This system really stresses a practical, almost scientific approach to magic. What about the tools? Does a chaos magician need fancy robes and altars?
Not at all, and this is another area where Hine breaks from tradition. He emphasizes using everyday objects like candles for inscribing sigils, charging during intimate moments,
Mangles.
string for non-enchantments or creating webs of connection, givens, gifts with inherent meaning you can tap into, and found objects, like an old telephone handset used to call a friend, who then surprisingly appeared within 5 minutes.
Using a phone to call someone psychically? That's brilliant.
Crystals, dominoes, wood, crayons, chalk, pendulums, and balloons are all mentioned for various magical uses.
And even creating magical figures from ordinary objects. That sounds quite charming.
Yes, like empowering a ceramic pixie figure to find lost items around the house and feeding it by attributing successes and thanking it.
Feeding the pixie.
It's a very basic, accessible approach to magical evocation, imbuing mundane objects with magical purpose.
What about the more traditional, formal magical weapons? The wand, dagger, chalice, pentacle, and lamp. Do they have a place?
They do, but Hine reframes their use. He explains their symbolic and practical uses. The wand staff for projecting will, the dagger for analysis and discrimination, the chalice as a receptacle for unhindered perception.
Okay, the classic tools.
The pentacle for synthesis and manifestation,
Okay.
and the lamp for inspiration and gnosis. However, he emphasizes that the qualities these weapons represent are far more important than the physical objects themselves.
It's the quality, not the object.
Exactly. He illustrates how these weapons can operate in everyday life, for example, within an author's writing process. It's about the underlying function, not the prop.
This idea of responsive sorcery sounds like it's about being agile with your magical practice, always adapting.
It is. Magic should be responsive to changes in your life situation, maximizing effectiveness rather than being a free lunch.
No free lunch, right?
The core principle is that magic works through the easiest route possible, the path of least resistance. Hine then delves into common areas people apply sorcery.
Like protection. That's probably one of the first things people think of.
Protection spells are popular, but Hine immediately questions what you're protecting from.
Good question.
He points out that 99% of magical attack is actually self-inflicted, often unconsciously covering up personal inadequacies or unresolved issues.
Back to self-inflicted again.
He stresses that cultivating a finely tuned warning sense, your intuition, is far more useful than worrying about external attacks.
And love magic, which is always popular.
Extremely popular, yes. But Hine emphasizes the importance of observation and nonverbal communication skills.
Observation skills.
He cautions against confusing a fleeting sexual impulse with a desire for a relationship. He also stresses enchanting for the lover I need.
Need not want.
Someone who truly aligns with your growth over the lover I want. Someone who might just fulfill a superficial fantasy. He subtly warns against interfering in others' relationships,
Probably wise.
noting how much of a curse a new ill-fated relationship can become for all involved.
What about cursing? That's definitely a controversial practice that raises eyebrows.
It is, but Hine acknowledges it as an ancient practice. He highlights that arguments about curses being wrong or incurring karmic consequences often ignore their historical lineage,
Right.
especially in tribal societies where other forms of retaliation aren't possible. He stresses the importance of personal responsibility for your actions and the ethical considerations involved,
Responsibility is key.
providing examples like causing a multiple rapist to become clumsy and exposed, or performing a requiem mass for a friend with terminal cancer who wishes to die peacefully.
Wow, heavy examples.
The larger point Hine makes is about transforming intense negative emotions, like anger, into creative, directed action, which can, for instance, lead to the creation of viral servitors.
It sounds like the highest level of mastery is performing magic without any props at all. The empty-handed gesture.
That's considered the mark of an advanced sorcerer performing magic without physical props, relying purely on visualization, confidence, and freeing desire from ego.
Just pure intent.
These skills are, of course, developed through more formal sorcery practice and deep inner work.
Now, this next concept is truly fascinating and takes us into almost a cybernetic realm. Servitor magic. Creating conscious thought forms.
Servitors, also known as thought forms or tulpas, are consciously created entities designed to perform specific tasks for you.
Magical assistants.
They're treated in quite cybernetic terms within chaos magic, almost like programming an AI. Hine outlines a detailed 7-step design sequence.
How do you design one of these magical assistants?
First, you define a specific intent, which is the servitor's core purpose, like to promote rapid recovery and health in name. This is then rendered into a sigil,
The sigil again.
which acts as its etheric DNA. Second, you add symbols appropriate to the servitor's task, embellishing the sigil with images like a hexagram for balance or the number 7 for harmony. These symbols are considered the language of the deep mind.
Okay, intent and symbols.
Third, you consider the time factor, whether it operates continuously or for specific periods, and crucially, you encode self-destruct instructions or plan for its ritual reabsorption after its task is complete.
So they don't just hang around forever, potentially causing unforeseen problems.
Ideally not, to reclaim responsibility for its energy and actions. Fourth, you give it a name, e.g., 2my for healing, a can-do for overcoming obstacles, go-who for general success.
Catchy names.
That can be used as a mantra to activate it. Fifth, choose a material base, a physical focus like a bottle, a ring, a crystal, or a figurine. You can even apply bodily fluids for a stronger link.
A physical anchor.
And sixth, determine a specific shape, which can be anything from a tiny homunculi to a morphic sphere. A common practice is visualizing a featureless, pulsing sphere.
So, once designed, how do you launch a servitor and set it to work?
A typical launch sequence involves a banishing ritual to clear the space, a clear statement of intent for the servitor, performing a lightning flash exercise to energize yourself,
Energize first.
then the actual airburst servitor launch. This involves coalescing energy into a sphere, forming it into a column, programming the servitor with its sigil, symbols, and name, building tension, and then a powerful blast-off release.
Blast off.
This is then usually followed by a reprise, banishing to fully dismiss the energy and let the servitor go to work.
Are there different kinds of servitors for different uses?
Yes, Hine discusses both task-specific and general-purpose servitors. For example, I Can Do was a general-purpose servitor created by a group to assist with overcoming obstacles,
I can do nice.
capable of dividing holographically to work on multiple problems at once. Go-Who was another, visualized as a black concave mirror used for divination and enchantment.
What are the risks of using servitors? It sounds like you're creating a kind of autonomous entity.
One risk is servitor dependency. Hine describes the Eureka servitor, created for creativity, which became so dominant that when it went offline, the creator found it much harder to think creatively on their own.
Becoming reliant.
This highlights the importance of recalling or disassembling them to prevent becoming reliant. There's also the fascinating concept of viral servitors.
Viral. Like a computer virus.
Kind of. They are programmed for replication and can generate confusion fields like lost keys or electrical blowouts if their tasks aren't met, intensifying if deadlines are missed.
That sounds intense. And the book actually describes servitor programming languages.
It approaches it through a quasi-cybernetics paradigm. It discusses sigil circuits, mixing symbols from different systems and flowcharts with if then logic for complex operations.
If then logic and magic.
This paradigm applies to enchantment in general, viewing situations like programs or flowcharts that you can influence with clear, structured commands.
Moving from self-created entities to working with established ones. Functional spirits. How does chaos magic approach these?
These are spirits from historical grimoires, like the Lesser Key of Solomon, which have provenance over specific situations.
The old grimoire spirits.
Instead of just formal ritual summoning, Hine suggests summoning them when you find yourself in an appropriate real-world situation where their specific expertise is needed.
Summoning them on the spot.
Exactly.
Like the rather delightfully named spirit, Goflafog.
Yes. Goful Fog is Hine's personal spirit who eases traffic blockages.
A traffic spirit. Awesome.
Appearing as a shades-wearing cat on a skateboard, associated with the sound meow.
A cat on a skateboard. I love it.
You summon him when stuck in traffic, visualize yourself with him, and then as an offering you allow someone else space to move in traffic, or you're kind to the next real cat you see.
Practical offerings.
Hine also describes how such spirits can be assembled by groups for collective magical work. It's a very modern, practical take on working with spiritual entities.
So much of what we've talked about is about external manifestation.
Mm.
But chaos magic also has a deep focus on inner transformation, which the book calls ego magic. It's about charting the self.
Exactly. Our sense of being an individual emerges from complex clusters of beliefs, attitudes, self-definitions, and those ego fictions we mentioned earlier.
Right, the ego fictions.
Chaos magic places strong emphasis on identity work within consensus reality, recognizing that identity itself is a fluid and fragile construct.
Identity isn't fixed.
It involves thoroughly deconditioning yourself from the mesh of beliefs and attitudes that limit you, truly becoming aware of who you think you are versus who you could be.
And how do you even begin this profound process of self-examination? The book offers some practical preliminary exercises.
It does. Hine provides several exercises for charting the self. First, third person.
Write about yourself in the third person.
Yes, as if another person were writing about you, including both your strengths and weaknesses. This helps you gain perspective.
Okay. What else?
Second, lists. Divide a page to list strengths, weaknesses, life successes, life failures, fears, fantasies, things which attract you, and that which repels you.
Comprehensive lists.
Third, a book of blunders. Catalog every emotionally painful, guilty, or embarrassing instance in your life to gain an honest, non-judgmental record of your patterns.
Oof, book of blunders. Sounds tough.
Fourth, suppressions. Compile a list of repressed aspects of yourself, your fears, your fantasies, those mad thoughts you usually push away.
The hidden stuff.
And fifth, storytelling. Create narratives about other people's conversations you've overheard. This helps you understand your own pattern recognition and projections, revealing your biases.
That sounds incredibly revealing and perhaps a bit uncomfortable, but powerful for self-awareness.
It's deep work.
And then there are these obsessional demons. What are they exactly in this context?
Personal demons are defined as latent psyche structures, unresolved complexes, which are experienced as being beyond conscious control. In tantric practice, these are called kleshas.
Kleshas.
They're essentially blocks of behavior like jealousy or procrastination that tend to appear in stressful situations. They're often related to knots of tension in the body.
Tension knots, right.
And have physiological, behavioral, and cognitive layers. Hine illustrates how addiction demons, for instance, can collude with others, like jealousy and fear restriction demons.
Demons colluding.
Creating complex, self-sabotaging patterns.
And fantasy is identified as being key to these demons.
Yes. Fantasy is described as the cornerstone of obsession, where the desire to maintain the fantasy can actually be stronger than the desire to realize it in reality.
Preferring the fantasy.
These obsessional thought forms are seen as monsters bred from the darker recesses of mind, fed by your own psychic energy. The goal, Hine says, is to break the grip by identifying and consciously pulling apart these cognitive, physiological, and behavioral components that make up the obsession.
So how do you actually confront these inner blocks in a magical sense? The book introduces Ganesha as the binder of demons.
Oh, this is a truly unique approach. Ganesha is a popular Indian deity, known as the remover of obstacles and grantor of luck and freedom.
Ganesha, the elephant god.
He's depicted with an elephant head, human body, a tusk, noose, goad, and makes a boon gesture. His symbolic attributes are incredibly rich: the strength of an elephant, human intelligence, and the cunning of his vehicle, the mouse.
And he fought specific obsessional demons in mythology, right?
He did. The Upa Purana details 8 incarnations of Ganesha who fought personified demons such as Kamasura, lust; Krodhasura, unjust anger; Loghasura, greed; Mohasura, infatuation; Matsura, jealousy; Mamasura, attachment; and Abhimansura, egotistic pride.
Wow, he took on the whole lot.
His pot-bellied body represents the universe. His large ears sift truth. His trunk symbolizes discrimination. And his broken tusk signifies sacrifice. The mouse vehicle represents small desires and doubts, which Ganesha, being so vast, effortlessly manages.
So how do you use Ganesha in practice for this demon morphing, the Ganesha demon morphing exercise?
This is a powerful, step-by-step visualization for transforming a demon. You relax deeply, then visualize Ganesha forming in your belly.
Ganesha in your belly.
The key is to become Ganesha yourself, experiencing his profound calm and strength. From this state, you then observe a stressful situation and notice the bodily sensations associated with it, stilling your thoughts.
Become Ganesha.
Okay. It's about approaching these demons from a condition of playful, powerful relaxation.
And the stop, look, relax word sounds like a practical way to interrupt obsessive patterns.
It is. You visualize a demon-provoking situation, let the thoughts whirl, then visualize Ganesha lifting his trunk and blasting an ear-splitting trumpet sound, a mental
trumpet blast.
That rips apart the images. The sound becomes a word you can hurl at the demon to immediately halt its response, allowing you to relax and view the situation calmly.
Stop it in its tracks.
From that detached state, you can then dialogue with the demon to understand and eventually repurpose its energy.
That's incredibly practical for managing inner turmoil. What are some other magical responses to demons Hine offers?
One is to feed to exhaustion, allowing a demon, like jealousy, to rage to absurd lengths until it's completely exhausted and becomes almost laughable in its absurdity.
Let it burn itself out.
Another is to offer it death, threatening a demon with literal obliteration. Hine notes that demons don't want to die, so this forces them to freeze, allowing you to examine them.
Threaten the demon. Interesting tactic.
Then there are demonic pacts. Acknowledging a demon and consciously transforming its action to enhance your personal power, like transforming undirected anger into creative energy.
Like the viral servitor idea.
Exactly. Hine shares an anecdote of his secretary, whose irritating comments led him to calmly and directly state his anger, which diffused the situation and gave him back his power.
And for deeply dysfunctional demons, especially those that attach to others, there's banishing with extreme prejudice.
Yes. For others, deeply dysfunctional demons like addictions, it's about having the detachment to separate addict and demon and banish the demon.
Detachment is crucial there.
Understanding that powerful addiction demons will try to draw you into the host's destructive behavior patterns. You act to sever that connection.
Moving on to a more positive inner force, what is the personal genius Hine describes?
This is identified as your ultimate creative source of power and inspiration, known by various names like the Holy Guardian Angel or Higher Self.
With a creative source.
Hine likens it to the tantric exercise, feeding the fire. Imagining your body is hollow with an inner flickering flame fed by all your experiences, your breaths, your awareness, your emotions, thoughts, victories, and defeats.
Feeding the inner flame.
This flame is Kundalini Shakti, a primal power not under ego control. The goal, he says, is to cultivate non-attachment, becoming a hollow pipe for this power to flow freely through you, unimpeded by egoic desires.
Become a channel for it.
Precisely.
And what about channeled entities? The book takes a surprisingly critical look at them, which is refreshing.
It does. Hine examines various channeled entities like spirit guides, masters, and space beings, critiquing what he sees as a new age, lack of discrimination.
Lack of discrimination.
The messages are often overwhelmingly about love and harmony, using platitudinous jargon. He notes a historical tendency for the quality of communications to degenerate as the recipient's ego involvement increases.
The ego getting in the way.
Often leading to cult formation.
So what might these entities really be, if not wholly objective beings from another dimension?
Hine suggests they are not wholly objective, nor are they simply fictitious. He uses William Gibson's Neuromancer, where AI constructs generate personalities as interfaces for accessing vast information as a potential model.
Like AI interface.
Yeah. He also references Diane Fortune's David Carson's, a non-existent contact who functioned as an interface for her to access information she believed was external. These entities, Hine proposes, are windows into chaos, translated into meaningful information by our own perceptual limits. They are a way for the deep mind to communicate.
So at its core, magic is about change. And how do you integrate all this work from external sorcery to internal ego transformation into your everyday life?
It requires making sense of your work and integrating it into a dynamic interaction with a moving, fluid universe. This brings us to a crucial concept: initiation as a process.
Initiation. People often misunderstand initiation as a one-time elitist event, a secret ceremony.
Right, like getting a certificate.
But Hine clearly defines it differently.
Exactly. The book defines initiation as a threshold of change that occurs many times throughout life, with peaks, troughs, and plateaus rather than a singular event.
Thresholds of change.
Joseph Campbell's extensive mapping of initiatory stages is referenced, showing how these cycles are applicable even to everyday life, not just ancient shamanism. The core insight is recognizing that you are standing at a crossroads, a threshold of change, and consciously choosing new behavioral or emotional patterns to step across.
And the first stage of this process is often unpleasant, a crisis and call.
Yes, often. It's a period of intense questioning of previously held beliefs and values, a journey into the wilderness, which can be physical or mental isolation designed to loosen your fixed beliefs.
The wilderness journey.
In shamanic cultures, this is often experienced as the initiatory sickness, which Western observers might label divine madness or psychopathology.
Right.
But Hine emphasizes it's recognized as a difficult yet profoundly useful developmental process.
This sounds strikingly similar to the dark night of the soul described by mystics.
It is. St. John of the Cross, a Christian mystic, wrote eloquently of this experience of spiritual desolation, where all faculties seem empty and useless. It's a universal pattern of profound transition.
So initiation isn't always these huge, dramatic, life-altering events. There are smaller, more subtle ones too.
Absolutely. Hine distinguishes between macro and micro initiations. Macro initiations are major life shifts, like the collapse of a long-term relationship or a terminal illness diagnosis.
The big ones.
Micro initiations are more specific, smaller changes, like a sudden new interest in accounting that completely redirects your career path.
Even something like accounting.
The key in both is that conscious recognition. You are at a crossroads, a threshold of change, an opportunity to evolve.
And how do you consciously navigate these initiatory periods, big or small?
You apply a familiar framework, the APIE formula for initiation.
APIE, like PIE before.
Similar idea, yeah. Assess, stop, look around, examine the possibilities before you, use divination or self-reflection to gather information about the situation.
Assess first.
Plan. Choose a conscious course of action. Identify your resources, magical, material, financial, and human support.
Then plot.
Implement. This is often the hardest part, overcoming fear and inertia. But Hine stresses that each step forward builds momentum and reinforces your choice.
Implement, take action.
And evaluate. Assimilate the experience, learn the lessons, and truly make that knowledge flesh, integrating it into your being, transforming you.
The book also mentions ecstasy and the abyss. What's the connection there?
Ecstasy literally means away from stillness, implying agitation or being transported.
Away from stillness.
This stage is about transforming fear into wonder and fuel, courageously facing the awareness of the fragility of day-to-day experiences and the hidden complexity behind normality.
Facing the fragility.
This can lead to profound death-rebirth experiences like a snake sloughing off its skin, shedding old patterns of thought and belief, and descending into the deep mind.
Shedding the old skin.
Where autosymbolic images, inner entities, or spirits that arise from your own psyche can emerge as powerful allies or guides.
Are there common characteristics of these transformative experiences that bridge different cultures and paths?
Yes. Hine summarizes 8 common characteristics: a sense of unity, transcendence of space and time, positive sensations, a feeling of the numinous or sacred,
Unity. Transcendence.
absolute certitude in the experience, paradoxical insights where opposites reconcile, transience, they don't last forever, and resultant change in attitude and behavior.
8 characteristics.
He even notes their neurological correlates, highlighting how these experiences aren't just spiritual but have echoes in our brain activity.
Brain activity too.
Particularly in areas like the reticular formation and limbic system, which are deeply involved in our awareness, emotions, and memories, suggesting a profound physical basis for these shifts in perception.
And this ties into a scientific theory too, doesn't it? Ilya Prigognine's dissipative structures.
It does. This theory from Nobel laureate Ilya Prigogine explains how systems, when pushed to the brink of instability, when they're in a state of chaos, don't just break down.
What happens then?
Instead, they can spontaneously reorganize into new, higher-order systems that require more energy, but are more integrated and disposed to future transformation.
Order out of chaos.
Think of it like a personal crisis, pushing you to fundamentally transform into a stronger, more adaptable version of yourself. Hine applies this to neurological evolution via psychotechnology, showing how even chaos can lead to new, more complex order.
So once you achieve illumination, a peak, is that it?
No.
You done with the magical journey?
No, Hine is very clear on this. The book emphasizes eternal vigilance.
Eternal vigilance.
Illumination is a peak, not an endpoint. Conditioning patterns are insidious, and you need constant vigilance to prevent regression.
Can't rest on your laurels.
While death-rebirth experiences bring lasting benefits and alleviate many problems, the journey of transformation and growth continues endlessly.
And finally, what's the ultimate perspective on gnosis within this framework?
Hine reiterates gnosis on two levels. First, as a peak experience of no mind, the high point of magical trance. Second, and perhaps more profoundly, as knowledge of the heart. Perceptions that are difficult to express in language but are grasped profoundly through direct experience.
Knowledge of the heart.
It's like knowing how to ride a bike. You can't truly explain it, you have to experience it. This knowledge of the heart is the secret language of magic. To truly grasp the meaning, you have to go through the experience first.
Experiential knowledge.
Gnosis, in this ultimate sense, is not merely understanding. It's understanding that impels you to act in a certain way.
So it's a dynamic, ongoing process that fundamentally changes you from the inside out, affecting every moment.
Precisely. As Hine concludes, as you work with magic, so magic works upon you. Such is the nature of chaos.
We've journeyed deep into the world of chaos magic today, exploring its core principles from the avoidance of dogmatism and the pursuit of technical excellence to deep deconditioning and the transformative power of gnosis.
Yeah, quite a trip.
We've seen how it offers surprisingly practical applications in techniques like sigil magic and servitor creation, and how it demands profound inner work through ego transformation and continuous cycles of initiation.
It truly is a system that dissolves the artificial boundaries between the mundane and the mystical, urging a rigorous, experimental approach to life itself. It's about taking personal responsibility and embracing your inherent ability to reshape yourself and your reality, rather than relying on external powers or rigid dogma.
So what does this all mean for you sitting there right now? Consider this provocative thought from Phil Hine himself.
Yeah.
Magic is not so much something which you do occasionally behind closed doors or
Right.
in the space behind your closed eyes, but a way of living your life, a way of approaching the world you move through and everything in it.
A way of living.
What does it mean for you to view every single moment as an opportunity for magical engagement and profound personal transformation? Something to ponder as you go about your day.